All right, class. First off, as always, good day. I'm glad you're here. So, today we're going to be talking about the U.S. involvement in Africa. And we talked about one of the codes already, the Native American code talkers. Now we're going to talk about the other code that was very, very difficult to break, the Enigma machine. So, we're going to talk about that today. Okay. So, here is your warm up picture. Now, some students today kind of had a little bit trouble with this warm up, mainly because it's not something you typically see. But like I told them, think of it like this: what's in a holster, right? What's usually typically in a holster? And a lot of people got the right answer, and I'm sure you do too. You already probably said it in your head. Now, remember, what's in the holster is typically, viewed as a tool, okay? But the thing is, it is a dangerous tool, especially if in the wrong hands. So, knowing that and seeing how this picture is illustrating here, what do you think this artist is trying to say about the guy in the holster? Okay, so think about it, write your response, because we're moving on in three, two, one. All right, so June 21st, 1942, General George Marshall delivered a letter to Prime Minister Winston Churchill of Britain. Now, the thing is, this message was basically supposed to be for his eyes only. And so, when General George Marshall makes his way to Winston Churchill, he tells him, "Sir, this letter is from the President of the United States for you." Churchill gets the letter, opens it up, and all it says on there is, "What can we do to help?" And Churchill just gives a sigh of relief because he now knows, hey, the US is backing us up. The US has a bunch of factories, materials, you they're running low on everything. They've been fighting the war for the past 3 years, and they're running low on everything: soldiers, ammunition, morale, everything, physical and non physical, you know. So to have the US come in now really took a load off their shoulders. All right. Now, one of the things he was telling them is, Africa, we need your guys' help in Africa. Because that guy you see in the picture right there, that is Field Marshal Erwin Rommel. This dude was a genius when it came to fighting in the desert. That's why he got the nickname the Desert Fox. Um, he was, just torturous to the British, just beating them every time they met up. And the thing is, he was in charge of the German Panzer Division. A German Panzer is a German tank. These tanks were tough. They were well built. Engineering in them was phenomenal, at that time. So to go around the desert and to have a man who really knew how to fight in the desert, it was like a win-win. And that's exactly what they did against the British. They were winning. They beat the British at Tobruk. I think I said that right. And basically, then uh, Churchill and FDR come together and like, okay, we need to get these Nazis out of Africa because they're trying to go to the Middle East to get oil. So on August 13th, 1942, U.S. General Dwight D. Eisenhower, is made commander of Operation Torch, the plan to stop the Nazis and Rommel from getting to the Middle East and Africa. So November 8th, the United States joined the fight in North Africa with the help of the British and the Americans. Win in Algeria, in French Morocco. The Allies retake Tobruk on November 13th. So things are looking good, but the thing is, they're not going head to head directly with Rommel. They're going against other commanders who are in charge of taking over those areas. Um, they finally do meet up with Rommel at the Kasserine Pass, and this fight basically lasts like a week, from February 19th to the 25th. They are tested badly with him, and they find out for themselves why so many German or so many British people were just like, he's good. They found that for themselves. But the thing is, the U.S. have a secret weapon. There's a general named by the name of George S. Patton, and he's put in command in Africa. Now, Patton is a real genius because the thing is, he's a student of military history. This guy studied fighting since like the days of the Macedonians with Alexander the Great, the the Greeks, the Romans, the Huns, the oh my gosh, I'm just having a brain fart right now. Let's just say basically everyone from the beginning of time all the way to this time. He studied war. How did this side win? Why did this side lose? How could the losing side have won? You know, he looked at terrain, tactics, and everything. This guy was a real student of military history and how to fight. So when he went against Rommel was like just flabbergasted. He's like, whoa, because he counterattacked Rommel and basically pushed the Nazi forces out of Tanzania. And Rommel was not expecting that because again, Patton used his knowledge in history to defeat Rommel, whereas he was using these tactics that have always worked. Patton knew this works, this doesn't work. This was used by this group. They attacked like this. This group lost because they didn't watch their flank because of the terrain and that. We're not gonna fall into that thing. We're gonna have our flank watched. So he really studied. He knew his stuff. Now the guy you see in that picture right there, that is George Patton. Okay. And with him now at the helm, he's just beating the Nazis back and back and back. And the thing is, too, he was a very tough general. All right. He wasn't one of the guys like, oh, well, we can't do that. Oh, all right. Let's find another way. No, he was like, no, we're going this way. We're doing this. There's a famous story where a plane was coming at him and he was shooting at it with his pistol, a 6-bullet pistol. Dude was nuts, but he was tough. So on May 13th, 1943, the Axis are forced out of North Africa. Okay. Um, and they basically say, you know what? Some guys are captured, some Nazis are captured, and the rest basically try to go to Italy, thinking, hey, we're going to go with our buddies, the Italians. We're going to stay with them over there. Thing is, that was probably one of the stupidest things they could have done. Because again, Italy has been conquered by so many people. There's been so many battles through there. And like I said, Patton knew his history. So he knew what the Macedonians did, the Greeks, the Romans, the Carthaginians, the Huns, the Dark Ages people, the different kings and countries, and the Moors. He knew what everyone did in fighting in that area. There's a whole history of people fighting in Italy. So when they went in there, he was like, no problem. I know what to do. They're at this town. There was a famous battle where these guys won because they did a sneak attack by doing this. We're going to try that. So they land in Sicily, gain control of the Mediterranean Sea. They're bombing Rome. The citizens of Rome are just, of Italy are just flabbergasted because the Allies are just pushing through, beating back the Germans and the Italians. So on July 25th, the Fascist Grand Council passes a vote of no confidence in Benito Mussolini, basically saying, we don't trust you no more. We don't want you no more as our leader. So he is arrested. He has a quote unquote trial, and he is executed. They hang him. And martial law is declared in Italy. So after another month or so, 2 months or so, uh, Italy decides, you know what, we're done. We're done with this fighting. We're done with this war. And this really upsets the Germans. The Germans are like, no, you can't just quit. You can't quit on us. We're supposed to fight to the last man and this. And Italy's like, yeah, no, we're done. You know, we're just going to surrender. So then the Germans are like, well, if you guys are going to surrender, we might as well take over you, just like we've done these other countries. So this ticks off the Italians. They're like, they're not going to attack us. And sure enough, the Germans do. So they go, you know what? Fine. You want to attack us? We're going to join the Allied side. And that's what they do. On October 6th, 1943, they switch sides from the Axis to the Allies. And like I've said it in for years to students, would you trust a group of people who said they're going to fight with you that you were just fighting against them like a month or two ago? Would you trust those people? And the answer always varies. So um, think that to yourself. Would you trust those Italians if you were the Allies? All right. So we talked about Africa be taken over and now Italy. Now we're going to talk about the code that was basically seen as unbreakable for that Axis, the enemies, the Germans and, Italians and Japanese. And it's that machine right there you see. The Enigma machine is a device used by the German military command to encode strategic messages throughout World War II. Now, here's the thing, this machine was not created for war. In fact, this thing was created 16 years before World War II started in 1923 by a man named Edward Elgar. Okay. Now, to most people, they kind of look at it and think, oh, that looks like a typewriter. Yeah, no, it's a more sophisticated than that. It's such a complicated machine, and yet it's so small. And just looking at it, you would think, what's so great about it? Trust me, it's a fascinating machine. Basically, it would switch letters that a person types and appears onto another, letter to somebody else. Now, the person could write down the stuff, right? And if they had the key, they could decipher the message. But if they didn't, it was almost impossible to break the code. Okay. Now, if you're listening to the video, first off, I appreciate you listening. But if you see those rotors, those three reels right there, see what says like 1, 13, 14, all that stuff. Um, I'm gonna mention that in a second. So just keep that image in your head. Okay. So inside the machine were those three rotors. But the thing is, it wasn't just three rotors. You had five to pick from. So of the five, you had three that you had to put in. Okay. And each one of those rotors, all five of them, had 26 positions. Okay. Representing letters, 26 letters. Okay. And then at the front of it, there was a plug where you had to put 10 pairs that connected. Now, if any one of these things was off, you weren't going to get the code. It was going to be extremely difficult. Now, here's where it gets really like, whoa, that's how the heck that number you see. Those are the total possibilities of codes. Okay. Now, I've challenged students in class to say that number, and nobody has. Okay. Some people try to say, oh, like somewhere in the trillions. The trillions is where you see those three fives. You still got six numbers in front of it. Yeah. Okay. The way you say that number, it's like this. I'll say it slow at first and I'll say it again, fast. It's 158 quintillion, 964 quadrillion, 555 trillion, 217 billion, 826,360,000. That's how many possibilities were. Okay. Now, how you normally say it 158 quintillion, 962 quadrillion, 555 trillion, 217 billion, 826,360,000. That's how you say that number. All right. So that just show you how elaborate that machine was. Even though it just looked like a tiny little box, like a shoe box or something. No, that machine inside was so sophisticated. Now, here's the thing. That's if you have just one code. That's a total number of possibilities. Now, a Polish mathematicians figured out how to break the code, you know. And before the war began, they found out, hey, the Germans are going to be using the Enigma machine. So they shared their knowledge with the British, like, hey, if something happens to us, use this knowledge. This is how you're going to break their code. Here's the thing. The Nazis are no idiots. They're not. German people are very, very smart. And they realize the same thing that the Polish mathematicians realize. They're like, oh, if we keep the same code, there's a way to actually find out the code. It takes probability and things like that. So, yeah. So that's where that part comes in. Now, thing is, the German basically had a backup plan, which was to basically uh, change the code every day. They would change the code at midnight. Now, they would have a large part of paper that said this was the code this day, this day, this day, this day. And if the operators of the Enigma machine were ever caught or about to be caught, they could simply get that paper and dump it in water or drop water on it, and the ink would disappear. Okay. Now, I know some of you guys noticed probably my light going off and on. Yeah. So don't worry about that. Okay. But yeah. So that's what they would do. So a lot of these operator guys would either have a cup of water or their canteen with them, and whenever the like if something was to happen, allies are coming, this and that, they could send a message really quickly. Hey, the enemies are here. This not there's this many of them. I'm leaving my position, and then they would take the water and dump it on the paper so the ink went away. And again, the machine, you know, they could have it for all they want, but unless they had the code thing, they're not going to figure it out. They need that paper. So that's where the problem with the Allies came. They had to go through all those codes to figure out which one was the right one every day. Now, here is a little illustration of what would happen. So if you see where it says keyboard, that's the button thing you press. So if you press T on the plug board, remember, because there was 10 pairs, you had to make sure you had the right ones. It would then go to like C. So on the rotor spinner thing, it would find a C and say, okay, here, C. To go to the next thing, it has to go to W. So then it will go W, and so on and so forth. Go to the next rotor. Now, let's say you press T again. Let's say you're spelling the word better. You press the T again, you would not go to a C. It would go to another letter. And when it gets to the rotor, it would change. So it wouldn't be a C, it'd be like a D or an F or whatever, maybe, you know. So that's what made the code so difficult. It wasn't like, oh, you press A is for T and V is for I. And it wasn't like that. It changed with every time you press the button. Okay, so that's hopefully you're listening to this and you're seeing and understanding this because that's how elaborate this machine was. Now, the Nazis were so confident that nobody could break their code, they basically broadcasted their messages over the airwaves. Anybody with the radio could dial in and listen to the code. The problem is, again, there's so many possibilities that you wouldn't be able to fix it or get it. Like I said in class, there's somebody actually did the math stuff, and they said that like 10 people, if 10 people did one code a second, every second they tried one code, um, and they did that for 24 hours a day, 7 days a week, 365 days a year, it would take like 20 million years for them to break the code. Okay, because they would have to go through all the possibilities. Um, yeah, no. Okay, so that's the thing. And the thing is, again, let's say they did break it. Let's say they had a million men and they were able to figure it out, right? Um, in like 20 years, whatever. Well, guess what? The code changed every day. So the next day they had to go through all the different possibilities. Okay. So the code breakers had 18 hours every day to try to break the code before midnight struck and new codes were brought in. Imagine all that work, 18 hours trying to break this code, and it's for nothing. So there was a British mathematician named Alan Turing who had an idea about creating a device that could do math faster than a human. Now, here's the thing. Like I said in class, I know some of you guys are, math is not your strongest subject. Some of you guys have trouble doing like 5x equals 25, and you're like, trying to do the math in your head. Some of you guys might do a little better, which is awesome and great. But if you saw some elaborate mathematics, you might be like, "Ooh, that's going to take me a while." Some people can see it and do the math in their head. Okay, people are very smart. Okay, and some people can see math problems and do the math in their head quickly. He wanted a device that could go faster than any human. Now, there was no device at all, machine that could think faster than a human. So he had to create it. And eventually, him and his team would create what would be now known as a computer. So, this machine that his team and Turing created, they called it Bombi. And they would basically put the code in and let the thing go through all the possibilities. And the machine would go through and it kept going and going and going and going. And they're like, this thing should be working. Why is it going? And then finally, somebody, it hit them in the head. You know, at the end of every conversation, whether it's in person, on the phone, or in letters, they all have to end it the same way. All the Nazis had to say end it the same way, which was with Heil Hitler. They had to say it or write it down, whether it's face to face, on the phone, or in writing. So they took the code and they basically said, okay, maybe okay, so like maybe this is the last 6 letters of this word of the code. So let's say A is H, T is I, T is V, L is G, E is Q, and R is Z. So they put in the computer and to the Bombi, and all of a sudden goes starts doing the mathematics, and then like 20 minutes later, bam, it says it got the code. So they're like, okay, well, let's try something else. So they do another code. 20 minutes later, bam, says it got the code. Next day, they do the same thing. Try it. About 20 minutes later, bam. So now they're like, this machine just broke the code. Now, like I said, they can now know the prefix, the code to turn it in, and now they can type it in and see what the Germans are saying. Okay. Here's the problem, and there is a problem. They have the code, but now you have to ask yourselves, what happens if they use it? Now, it's easy to say things will be easy, things they're going to easily beat them. But think on the German side, what's going to happen? And that's where we're going to come up next time, next class, is the negative thing about breaking the code. All right. So hopefully you learned something new. Hopefully you enjoyed this lesson. So you guys, you take care, you be safe, and I'll see you guys later, okay? Sorry I hate to leave you on a cliffhanger, but yeah, my class.